Hello, my name is Penny.
And my name's Ben.
And welcome to Year 7's first ever presentation of learning.
We thank you all for coming.
We have all been working hard in all subjects to present to you our work.
And to answer our guiding question.
What do the communities of North East England owe to the miners?
Over our first term, we have developed an understanding of the Industrial Revolution and the importance of coal, the history of some local pits and the seams of coal, the Felling Pit disaster and the 1984 miners' strike.
We hope you all
enjoy Year 7's
first ever presentation of learning.
During immersion, we learned that a lot of things in Britain changed during the Industrial Revolution. Before the revolution started, Britain was made up of sparsely populated areas where the primary sector of farming was the dominant profession. People grew their own food to either trade or eat. There were only around 6 million people living in the UK at this point in time, so communities were usually stronger and knew each other better. We watched a video of the 2012 Olympic Games open ceremony to see how the community changed from 1750 to 1900. We saw how the grassland disappeared and was replaced by buildings. We saw people protesting and fighting as the power of the country grew, and everyone seemed to be struggling.
In immersion, we learnt about the LGSM, which were a small group that helped the miners throughout the 1984 to the 1985 miners' strike. They collected donations for the miners at Pride and then formed the LGSM because of injustice. The miners were not accepting of them at first, but because of the rumours that were spread around about them in the newspapers, but on TV. But after sharing their experiences for each other, they decided to join together for the 1985 London Pride Parade. The reason they supported each other was because the miners in the LGSM felt they had a shared experience, something we now know unites diverse groups.
For our admission in STEAM, first we did a BBK, a Building Background Knowledge Protocol. This was about the ground beneath our feet. We read a text about William Smith, the father of our British geology, who discovered a way to find coal without looking underground by just looking at the surface, using his knowledge of the pattern of strata of rock below the ground.
From this, he was able to predict where coal was found. We watched a video to start thinking about why the North East was at the centre of the Industrial Revolution. We then studied boreholes and coal mining data about the rock strata below Gateshead. We added notes to our BBK as we went along.
We then did a simple experiment mixing 100 centimetres cubes of water with another 100 centimetre cubes of water and produced 200 centimetres cube total volume. We assumed that all the liquids would do this, but it didn't. When 100 centimetres cubed of water and 100 centimetres cubed of ethanol mixed, they became 190 centimetres of cubed.
The rice and pea model helps us understand why this happened. The peas represent the ethanol and the rice represents the water particles. The model shows the rice fits in between the gaps of the peas, thereby taking up a smaller volume of space than expected.
A scientific model is a model that scientists use to explain the world around them. For example, we have been using the particle model to explain changes of state, and a simple model of an atom made from even tinier particles. We also used a model called the rock cycle to explain how rocks are formed. Let's take the particle model, which says that the state of matter are made from tiny particles. We later learned that some of these particles are in fact molecules and not just individual particles. So in any model, there is a simplification that means it is not perfect. It is not a perfect description of what is going on in reality.
An example is in the rock cycle that arrows often go from igneous to sedimentary rocks, but actually igneous rocks can become metamorphic. However, models are useful because they help us to think about the most important parts of any system and can be used to explain concepts, also to make a prediction before carrying out tests. Over time, models improve as scientists carry out more tests and refine models or work out that they are not accurate. In our expedition, we have studied the states of matter and how changes of state occur. This is a significant part of our scientific knowledge and links to our guiding question by explaining how igneous rocks are formed when molten rocks change of state.
We carried out an experiment investigating stearic acid and its cooling curve. We measured the temperature every 30 seconds to get an accurate measurement of how the state of matter affects the temperature of the stearic acid. We drew a line graph of our results. We noticed at first the temperature decreased quite quickly but gradually slowed down when it reached its melting point of 48 degrees.
At this point, the stearic acid's energy was being transferred to the making of strong bonds and the particles moving into a lower energy state, changing into a solid. The temperature only decreases when all particles have changed state.
We've also been studying the particle model to help us understand the structure of materials. The model helps us understand how the particles are arranged and how they rearrange to show the changes in state. Solids, liquids and gases all have a different arrangement of particles. For example, particles of a solid are not free to move but vibrate on the spot, are arranged together in a regular pattern to form a fixed shape.
The particles are chemically bonded together as the force of attraction between them is stronger than their kinetic energy. The force of attraction keeps the particles together while the kinetic energy acts to pull the particles away from each other.
A steam engine is a machine that uses change of state to perform mechanical work. In a steam engine, hot steam, which is usually supplied by a boiler, expands under pressure and part of the heat energy is then transferred to do work. Before heat is applied, the pistons are held in place due to the balance between the force of the upward pressure and the weight of the pistons.
In a steam engine, gas pressure is increased when the temperature starts to build up and the volume of the container decreases. As the temperature increases, pressure builds up. Then the coal combusts, making the piston rise. This is because the heat energy causes the gas particles to bounce off the walls of the piston violently.
When the volume increases and the temperature decreases, the pressure then also decreases. The gas particles move more slowly and the collisions are less violent and also less frequent. This means that the piston is pulled back down.
This cycle continues. The pressure of the gas is again increased when the temperature starts to build up and the volume of the container decreases. This again moves the piston upwards. The up and down motion of the pistons can be used to drive wheels attached to the pistons around. The steam engine was eventually developed into a train so that coal could be transported greater distances around the world.
To understand why coal is such an important resource, first we need to understand what it is made from and how it stores energy. Coal is made from matter. All matter in the universe is made from atoms. These atoms can join together to form molecules, which in turn form most of the objects around you. Atoms are composed of even smaller particles called protons, electrons, and neutrons. Coal is mostly made from the element carbon, and an element is a substance that is only made from one type of atom. A compound is a substance that is made from two or more types of atom in a specific ratio. We use chemical formula to describe compounds. For example, sodium hydroxide is composed of one sodium atom, one hydrogen atom, and one oxygen atom. This means it has the formula NaOH. Na stands for sodium, O stands for oxygen, H stands for hydrogen. The chemical formula not only tells you which atoms are present, but also how many there are in the compound. A common gas that is dangerous in the mine is fire damp, which we know as methane. Methane is made from molecules with one carbon atom and four hydrogen atoms. so the formula is CH4. Coal is a mixture as it is not pure and contains different types of molecules in every lump. However, it is mainly carbon and hydrogen and stores lots of energy in the bonds between the atoms. This is why it is a fuel, and as a fossil fuel, why it is so important during the Industrial Revolution.
In science, we have been learning about chemical reactions. A combustion reaction is a burning reaction. For a combustion reaction to happen, fuel, oxygen, and heat must be present. Substances react with oxygen, which releases heat and light energy. As the atoms rearrange, the reactant burns. Its bonds are being broken and energy is released. The products of combustion of a fuel like petrol are carbon dioxide and water. The combustion of coal was the reaction that fueled the Industrial Revolution. The energy released was used to turn water into steam, and this steam was used to power steam engines in pumps, trains, factories, and to heat houses.
In a practical session, we burned the metal magnesium. It burned bright with white flame, releasing lots of heat energy. The magnesium combined with oxygen to form the product that was called magnesium oxide. In another science practical, we also made the gas hydrogen and combusted it in a test tube. It released a lot of energy as it exploded with a distinctive squeaky pop. The hydrogen combined with oxygen to form the product that was called water.
In our STEAM sessions, we have been learning about coal, its formation and why it was useful to the northeast. Coal was formed from trees that once grew in swamps, which died and then partially decayed. They were covered by consecutive layers of mud and rock, trapping the dead plants with little or no oxygen, causing the microorganisms to die. It then stayed there for millions of years under heat and pressure, forcing it to form into coal. Heat from the Earth's core and pressure from the hundreds of meters of rocks above it formed the coal.
Coal was one of the main sources of fuel during the Industrial Revolution, which occurred in the 1760s to the 1840s. Coal is a fuel that can be used to create heat, energy, and the old fuel source, wood, wasn't very efficient at all. Due to limited transport at the time, moving the coal to other areas was very difficult and very pricey. This all helps us towards the guiding question, as it has helped us to understand how the Northeast happened to have the right conditions in the deep geological past to form coal. The Industrial Revolution occurred here in the northeast of England because most of the coal seams in Northumbria were close to the surface. This meant that it was easy to dig down to the coal seams and collect coal. There were thousands of tons worth of coal, so there was plenty of supplies.
Billy, get downstairs now, your breakfast's ready. Tony, what the hell are you doing?
Nothing.
We're supposed to be on the picket line in 5 minutes.
Get off me back then.
As soon as you get off his fat arse. Billy, you're going to be late, son.
Leave the bird alone, will you?
Billy, I'm warning you. Grandma, what are you doing?
I'm looking for my pasty.
Forget about your pasty. I'm making you a nice cooked breakfast. Boots off the table.
Have you seen me pasty?
Billy, get downstairs now or I'll tell you hiding for you.
What he lacks in a mother's touch?
What he lacks is a kick up the arse. Sit down.
I don't want a cooked breakfast.
Billy, get downstairs now.
Come in. The food in this house has been inedible since I'm alive.
Morning, Jackie. Ah, breakfast.
Well, that's breakfast.
Morning, Edna. Oi, I paid for that.
All properties theft company.
Morning, Edna.
What's good about it? They've purloined me bloody pasty.
vegetables basket.
What's that?
It's your pasty.
Oh, I thought they'd eaten it.
No, eat that, Grandpa. Mac.
You lot have it too bloody easy. I can remember the general strike.
How come you remember the general strike, but you can't remember where you put your pasty?
Oh, that's absolutely disgusting. Where are you off to now? I've got a nice sausage roll on the landing.
Wait a minute, what have I told you about drinking the bottle?
Aye, man.
I got you 50p.
Yeah, Dad gave it to us.
I got you yours.
No.
I'll be in your bedroom.
No. Random. Ma? Ma?
In immersion, we looked at some maps of the area of Whitburn. Over the years, these maps help us understand the layout of the area and how the village grew over time. We made many notices about what changed and what stayed the same over time. Importantly, we noticed that on the 1996 map, the mine and the train station just appeared. We predicted that the railway was used to transport coal. In one of the later maps, we looked at the mine and the railway was gone. We predicted that this was because the mine was closed, so there was no coal left to transport.
For our STEAM fieldwork, we went to Marsden Bay and worked alongside Carl, an expert geologist. Geologists study rocks and rock formations. They look deep into the world and how it's made. Some geologists also study the materials, processes, physical nature, and history of the Earth. They find and explore more about the Earth and its natural resources.
During our time there, we looked at coastal exposure in Marsden's Bay and the rock strata. We also expanded our knowledge by learning about the different layers in the cliffs.
When we did our fieldwork, we stayed up to 2 meters away from the cliffs because of erosion, which happens every day. An example of this is when rain hits the cliff. It takes little sediments of rain away with it, which then becomes sand.
As we looked around the beach, we picked up pebbles and used a hand lens, a very small magnifying glass, to identify what types of rock they are. We found several types, including magnesium limestone, sandstone, and quartz. The northeast magnesium limestone was deposited during the hot climate of the Permian Age, almost 250 million years ago. Magnesium limestone is a soft rock made from skeletal remains of sea creatures, or it is also formed when calcium carbonate shells of sea creatures crystallize and form magnesium limestone.
After the fieldwork, we had a much stronger understanding of how formation of the cliffs, how they are built up in layers, and why they will erode away.
The Felling Pit disaster was a significant event in our local history. On the 25th of May 1812, an explosion took place underground in the John Pit. The explosion was so severe that the ground trembled from up to a mile around. The mine was so deep that at first the explosion was not heard above ground. The cause of the explosion, like many of us at the time, was a build-up of, as we know of, fire damp, which was methane gas underground. This was ignited by a naked flame, causing the disastrous event.
Once the fire damp was ignited, the explosion occurred, and the blast sent coal dust, flames, and bodies into the air. Thick black dust filled the air, and Felling was thrown into darkness. Some brave men attempted to rescue miners, however, fire reached into the mine and halted their efforts. The mine had to be closed and sealed for 6 weeks while the fire burned out. 92 men and boys were killed. One of the youngest victims was 8 years old. So bodies of the miners was trapped were unrecognisable when they recovered. The felling pit explosion was one of the worst mining disasters in the country's history.
Following this horrific event, the Sunderland Society approached scientist Sir Humphrey Davy in the hope that a safer way of lighting underground could be developed. The Davy lamp was designed and made and used for generations after to make it safer to work with a flame underground.
Woodhorn Colliery is located on the east coast of Northumberland on the outskirts of Ashington. It was opened in 1894 by Ashington Coal Company. 2,000 men and women worked there in 1914. Throughout its history, it produced an enormous 600,000 tons of coal. Coal stopped being brought up from Woodhorn in 1966. Then it went via Ashington Colliery until 1981.
We went to Woodhorn Colliery and we learned about an ordinary day for the miners. We saw how they had to wash in the living room because they didn't really have electricity or bathrooms. We saw that when they were mining, they had no lights. It was just pitch black and they couldn't see anything, so they just had to mine with no light. Also, in the museum, we saw a wheel which was powered by steam that came from coal. While we were there, we saw a big fan that would produce blasting air that was really loud because back then they didn't have advanced fans like we do now. This fan was life-saving because to stop poisonous gases such as carbon dioxide would build up, so the fan acted as ventilation to keep the miners safe. Woodhorn was good to visit because you learned who the miners were and how they did things and what they went through. It was also good because it has a memorial for all the miners who died at Woodhorn Colliery over the years, making sure that they are honoured and not forgotten.
Burden Pit was built in 1820, 5.5 miles north of Newcastle. It was sunk there because there was a rich amount of coal 300 feet underground. Before the colliery was there, the area was rural. When the mine opened, more people came to live at the tiny cottages, which were located close to the mine because close to the mine, built especially for the miners and their families to live in. The miners moved there because there was a lot of money to be earned.
The community built schools in the village as well as a social club and a church. The everyday life in the community was good. When we went on fieldwork to Burden, we saw a pub called the Traveller's Rest, which opened in 1801, 221 years ago. There was at least 2 other pubs. This means that the people of Burden had somewhere to go after they came out the mines to see the mates.
The mine was really unhygienic. The miners would go in clean and come out unrecognisable because of the coal dust.
The mine had one major disaster on 2nd of March 1860. A build-up of fire damp caused a big explosion in the mine. 76 men and boys died from burns. Too much gas and mine collapses. The community was traumatized and devastated. Many families would have lost at least one loved one, as well as losing their houses afterwards, because there were no more miners in the family. One family, their cars, lost 3 people on that day.
Burden Mine was closed in November of 1975 as it was considered unsafe that this had an impact on the community because the miners could not feed their family and they sadly lost their homes and their money. Today at the site of the colliery there is a nature reserve. You can also see the pass where the trains used to carry the coal. There is also a memorial in the village to remember the miners who got killed in the explosion, so we can keep on to remember them.
Port of Blythe is located in Northumberland. There was a body of water nearby that was used to export coal to other places. Port of Blythe was very barren. It developed most during the 19th century due to mining. This made lots of houses necessary due to there being a mine that people worked in.
Blythe became a bigger community by 1920 to 1930 because of the trading. The Port of Blythe was successful as they shipped a total of 6 million tonnes of coal by the time of the closure in 1967.
Bates Colliery was located close to the shore of Blythe Beach and is in the county of Northumberland. It was sunk in 1932.
The colliery was profitable and managed to maintain a short life of 50 years from the time of sinking. Over the period of 1 annum in the colliery's era, they produced over 310,000 tonnes of coal. This is the result of over 1,600 workers mining, who were a mix of men and boys. When the colliery opened, 670 people worked down in the mines, while 140 people worked above ground in the colliery yard or other surface profession. After being sunk in 1932, the pit opened in 1935. 1,735 people lost their jobs due to the closure of the colliery 2 years after the miners' strike started in 1984.
Through research in Bates Colliery, we have learned about how many fatalities that could have been avoided and just how dangerous job mining is. This helps us with our guiding question because we get to see the risks miners took. For example, at Bates Colliery, a total of 35 men and children died over the period of 50 years.
Ashington Colliery is located in the town of Ashington, Northumberland. It was located here because the area was rich in coal, making it an ideal place to sink a mine. They knew this area was rich in coal because the sea coal had previously washed up on the shore. People then inferred that there would be coal underground. At this time, Ashington was one of the largest and productive mining villages in the world.
Ashington Mine was built in 1867 and closed in 1988. The owner of the mine, Jonathan Priestman, built housing so more people could work at the colliery nearby. This mine was very successful. It was once known as the biggest mine in the world. It had almost 2,000 people working down the mine when it opened and over 5,000 people when it was at its prime.
Ellington Colliery was located in Ellington on the east coast of Northumberland and was later joined with Linemouth Colliery underground. This colliery was called the Jewel in the Crown because they were hoping the mine would become a super pit.
Linemouth was farmland before the mine was sunk, which is depicted on a map from the 1800s. Ellington was a village that was in the area since Anglo-Saxon time. The name means Ella's People's Settlement. The
The village gained fame because of the mine being one of the largest in Northumberland. The community, like most mining communities, was strong, and the village was described as a thriving community, a community where everyone looked after each other.
Conditions weren't very good in the mine as there was constant flooding, with 1,022,000 gallons being pumped out daily. This would have been due to the mine going a whopping 6 miles out underneath the sea.
There were no major disasters in Ellington Combine, but there were plenty of accidental deaths over the years. The mine closed in February 1994. This had a massive impact on the village as over 2,000 people lost their jobs. Ellington was the final colliery to close in Northumberland.
Coxlodge Colliery, situated 3/4 of a mile away from Gosforth, was rich in coal. The pit was sunk there as Coxlodge was near the Tyne River, making it easy to export coal around the world. Coxlodge Colliery was sunk between 1809 and 1810 by Matthew Bell and Charles John Brandon.
Coxlodge opened in 1821. The mine had two shafts, the Regnan shaft and the Jubilee shaft, which were about 700 years apart. The Jubilee shaft was an upcast shaft, and the Regnan shaft was a downcast shaft. Coxlodge pit disaster happened on the 6th of March 1863 in the Bower pit. This happened because of an unexpected rush of gas, also known as fire damp, was ignited by a naked flame candle. This killed 22 men and boys that day. A local citizen called Joshua Turner turned deaf after the explosion because of how loud the explosion was. Coxlodge Colliery closed in 1894 because of the damage to the mine after the explosion. However, the miners were transferred to another pit.
Brankley Colliery, also referred to as Seaton Burn Colliery, is located 5 kilometres west of Cramlington. It is located near a river so they could transport the coal easier. Mining conditions were dreadful as the passageways were very narrow and confined. The government made girls and boys aged 10 and above work in the mines. They had to push heavy carts full of coal. This often led to lifelong back problems. There were lots of horrible deaths, such as there was a man aged 32 called George Thompson, a hewer or a coal digger. The seam was so thin that he could barely crawl into it on his hands and knees, and it may not have been big enough for him to stand upright. There was a box of compressed gunpowder in Seaton Burn Colliery which exploded in an unexplainable way. As he was using a candle, the flames engaged with the gunpowder and he was left with burns.
Killingworth Colliery was built in 1804. It was previously called Killingworth Colliery Westmore Pit, but then it closed and split into two separate mines. Killingworth Colliery has 3 major disasters which killed 5 or more people. One of these disasters was due to gunpowder coming into contact with a naked flame. It was a well-paid mine with 1,854 people working there. George Stevenson, who was an engineer at Killingworth Colliery, was renowned as the father of railways. His first steam engine helped with the success of the coal export at the Killingworth Colliery.
The Industrial Revolution changed the manufacturing process in Britain from producing things by hand to using machines. Britain was a rural community reliant on the primary industries such as farming. During the Industrial Revolution, it became an urban community and it became more reliant on the secondary industries such as manufacturing and factories. People began to move into cities because their jobs were available in more factories. This work was inside, so it was not seasonal. they could rely on the work. The cities were overcrowded and polluted, meaning it was easy to get illnesses and diseases. As they lived so close together in the factories, the children were used for cleaning the underneath of the machines, as the adults could not fit under, so they had to operate the machines. Before the Industrial Revolution, people used to be farmers and work from home. None of these changes would have happened without the discovery of coal, because coal was needed to run the machines.
In music, I've been working on the learning target. I can contribute ideas and sound to a classroom workshop. So as a class, we tried out different sounds and chose the ones that will go perfectly for the sound we wanted. We listened to Gresford, the Miners' Hymn, and another piece called The Cause of Labour is the Hope of the World. From this, we decided our music should be for brass with a marching drum. We divided into sections: plain melody, harmony and rhythm. Parts. Each week we would come up with new ideas for melodies and then work out which chords went the best with the melody. We composed this music so that we could dedicate it to the miners that were killed with the Felling Pit disaster in 1812.
Where the bloody hell did you go, boy? Nowhere. You're not going anywhere today. It's all kicking off out there. Look, Tony got hit with a truncheon. But Dad, I need to go see Michael. Don't be ridiculous. There are 5 policemen out there. They're surrounding the village. Dad! Hello. Hello? Oh no. I couldn't get to the hall, Billy, so I had to come here. Please, miss, go away. What's going on here? Please, miss, no. No, Billy, we're going to sort this one out once and for all. Look, Billy has an audition this morning for the Royal Ballet School. What? You've got to be joking. The Royal Ballet School? Billy has been coming to class and I've been giving him private lessons for the last 2 months. What? They're giving permission to teach a ballet. Look, Mr. Elliot, we're missing the audition as we speak. Hang on a minute, have you got any idea what we're going through in this village? Get out of my house, this town. You don't know anything about him, you sanctimonious little twit. I have been teaching for the last 2 months and none of you have even noticed. Come on, out the back, please run for the houses. I'm sorry, sir. You don't have a hope in hell.
In 1984, the year-long miners' strike took place. This is a significant event in our country's history, and it brought communities together whilst causing division across the country, especially between the government and the mine workers' union. Margaret Thatcher was one of the key stakeholders during the 1984 miners' strike, due to being the most powerful figure in Britain at the time. She was born in 1925 and was Prime Minister from 1975 till 1990. She was nicknamed the Iron Lady. During her time as Prime Minister, she made many controversial decisions like stopping free milk in schools and, most of all, closing all the collieries in Britain. As head of office, she had the power to close the mines, and even when the strikes happened, the government always had the upper hand.
During 1984, Arthur Scargill was the president of the National Union of Mine Workers and was the public face of the strike. His main goal was to get the majority of mine workers to agree with the strike, which was a goal he never achieved. He was the leading face of the strikers, although the strike was head of the NUM from 1982 to 2002. Overall, his goal was to keep the mines open and convince the country that mines should be kept open.
During the 1984 strikes, the striking miners didn't receive pay, so they were reliant on their partners and the local mining community to look after them. Women were heavily involved in protests against the mine closures as their husbands wouldn't have a job, nor did they feel there would be any job opportunities for the future generation.
Scabs, a derogatory term used to describe miners who continued to go to work during the strike, were some of the most important figures in 1984. Since the scabs went to work, there was still coal being mined in England. One of the most unpopular stakeholders in 1984, as they were seen to be in Maggie Thatcher's pocket, were the police. The police were heavily criticised as they were accused of using excessive force and therefore became as unpopular as the scabs they were seen as protecting.
Colin O'Brien, my granddad, was 28 when the miners' strike started and was serving in the police force. Colin had worked in the mines himself from 1971 to 1978, so had an awareness of the strength of the community surrounding the mine workers. At the time of the strike, Colin was a uniformed officer working in a special unit called the Patrol Group. They were trained in public order to quash riots. Colin's views on the strike was that it was all about politics and power and not so much about the people. He believed that the government led by Margaret Thatcher was determined to break the miners down and particularly undermine the miners' union. He believed that the police service was used as a political tool, and this was done to encourage police officers to enforce the government's views. On some of the picket lines, Colin found himself standing face to face with friends and former work colleagues, and as he stated, I was perceived as an enemy, which was difficult to deal with. In addition, he was brought up in a mining village where his parents still lived, and he found it difficult at times to visit them as the villagers had strong views about the police involvement.
I interviewed two ex-miners named Jeff and Keith from Ashington who were born and raised in a pit village, which they described as trusting and safe. Although the situation with the strike was chaotic and aggressive, life before the strike was relatively calm and peaceful, as everyone knew one another and everyone got along. When the strike happened, neither Jeff nor Keith wanted to take part in the strike, but they did to avoid any conflict or be put in danger.
Colin Yule was a brave and compassionate man, and he was born in Ashland when he was 15. He left school to try and become a miner, so he went into training for mining. He told us about a terrifying injury he received. Whilst driving in a minecart, a metal pole fell on the driver's side, which took his skin off his head. As well as this, he told us proudly of a time an explosion where his and his colleagues saved 100 pits of ponies who were trapped in a mine by shutting off the ventilation system. I would like to thank Colin for taking the time to speak to us, as it was very informative.
We interviewed Norman, an ex-miner from Ashington who worked at Ellington Colliery and went on strike in 1984. In 1985, when the strikes finally came to an end, Norman went back to work at Ellington Colliery. He was extremely relieved that
the strikes had ended. This wasn't for long though, as Ellington Colliery closed on the 18th of February 1994 by British Coal, one of the last collieries to close in England. This caused 1,100 people to lose their jobs. Norman never worked as a miner again. When he was asked about whether new employment opportunities were brought to Northumberland, and specifically Ashington, he said no. He said that it felt like a depressed area.
I interviewed George and Hugh. They had known each other since the collieries they worked in were joined together from underground. Both George and Hugh went on strike for their jobs, their goal to keep the mines open. Both George and Hugh said that they really looked up to Arthur Scargill, saying that they thought he was honest and brave. In the mine Hugh worked in, the miners not at work went to the canteen and stood on the table, convincing the scabs did not work. They both agreed that it was difficult to get used to earning as much money, not having lots of friends around, and working with female staff, as mining was such a male domination environment. George and Hugh do not agree that the strikes or the actions they took, although to regret that Margaret Thatcher won.
Tommy and Jim are very compassionate men who had the courage to talk to us about their experiences of being miners during the 1984 miners' strike. Tommy grew up in Ashington in a typical mining village and lived in a colliery house, which meant he grew up surrounded by other miners, whereas Jim lived in a small village in Morpeth. Jim told us that there wasn't much to do, only football fields. Growing up, Tommy and Jim both knew that they were going to be miners since their fathers worked in the mine.
During the 1984 miners' strike, Tommy and Jim were determined to keep their jobs in the mine. Tommy did this by motivating himself and others by saying, "Keep yourself in the mine." Both men said that they would go on strike again, and it was hard but worth it in the end. After the strike, Tommy stopped working in the mines for a few years, whereas Jim worked another job that he did alongside his mining job, and then retreated back to the mine that was still open. During their time in the mine, Tommy and Jim made many friends, which they are still in contact with to this day. This is further evidence that mining communities were close with each other.
We interviewed ex-miner Derek. He had kindness and humour that stood out to me pretty much as soon as we met him. Derek made it clear to us that all the miners helped each other whenever they were in need. They were happy and proud about the work that they did and were a strong community. Derek grew up in Ashington Pit Village. He went to a miners' school, which he said was where the miners learned about health and safety in the mines. This included underground training, and when the miners turned 18, they could go down the mines.
Derek's experiences during the strike hit him hard because of the fact his brothers had to go to work because they were deputies at the mine and had no choice. Derek was proud to be a miner and an activist and was one of the tens of thousands who went on strike to try and stop the closure of the mines. Derek is still involved in the mining community, the Miners' Welfare in Ashington and the Miners' Institute, which helped the miners learn more than a century.
One of the ex-miners that we interviewed was called Barry. He was born and raised in Ashington. He left school at the age of 15 and started working down the mine straight away. When he started working down the mine, Barry said he got long weekends every 3 weeks because of a rota. He said everybody liked it when Friday came because they finished work early and went back to back to work on a Monday.
Barry came from a long line of miners. He served at Linemouth Colliery for 10 years. He worked as an engineer fixing any machines that had broken. It was a very important job, yet difficult, as modern mines mostly relied on the machinery. During the strike, Barry worked as an apprentice, so he still needed to go to work to train to receive his education. This meant he did not go on strike.
The miners found the strikes very challenging as they did not get paid. The hardest thing Barry found was that he couldn't open the door for fresh air and light.
Barry has a very interesting mining story. He gave us a different insight as he still went to work without going on strike. He was a very brave and courageous miner.
The ex-miner we interviewed was called Alan, who worked as an engineer. He worked in Ashington Colliery for 25 years, and one of those many years was spent fighting for what he believed in. This fight was the 1984 to 85 miners' strike.
Alan was born into a strong mining community, so always knew he was going to get a mining job, and that's exactly what he did. When the miners started to strike, Alan made his contribution towards the activism count.
During the strike, Alan travelled across the northeast visiting many different picket lines. He told us he witnessed violence from the police who were put in place to protect the remaining working miners. Alan's talk of the miners' welfare gave the impression that it was central to their community and a place of comfort in difficult times.
Alan clearly believed strongly in his community, the Northumberland collieries, and the need to tell the story of those who tried so hard to protect jobs for people in the northeast.
John Heron and Ian Lyle were two ex-striking miners that we interviewed. John grew up in Ashington and he never left for his whole life. John's dad and uncle both worked down in the pit, and he himself is an ex-miner who took part in the 1984 to 1985 miners' strike and stood on picket lines. John was passionate and wanted to fight for the protection of his job down in Ellington pit. He told us that the companionship with the other miners was the best part of his working job.
Born in Ashington and lived there all his life, Ian Lyle is an ex-miner who started working in the mine at just 16 years of age. He talked with Ian about the strike that lasted a year, resulting in a very difficult time for all involved. Ian went on strike because he felt there was no other option. Ian said that at the time jobs were limited. Ian told us that he felt like they were taking away something his family needed to live. I could say it was an emotional discussion as he told us how it was a time where the whole community struggled because the strike caused a lot of conflict. When Ian talked about his job as a miner, it seemed that mining was something he enjoyed, despite it being a difficult job. When the mines closed down, he retrained as a tiler.
Eliza and I interviewed an ex-miner called Ken Dixon, who is now retired. He was very kind and answered our questions thoughtfully and thoroughly. Ken worked as a miner on the coalface of Ashington Colliery from a young age and been a hard worker in the mines, working overtime at every opportunity. Ken grew up in Ashington and his dad was a miner. He left school at the age of 16 to become a miner as he needed money and a job. Ken said that he hadn't really thought too much about how dangerous his job was until he heard of serious accidents that happened to others.
During the mining strike, Ken went onto the picket line with many of his colleagues and friends. He found it difficult when he had to watch his friends who felt forced back to work due to not having an income to support their families, getting shouted at and labelled as scabs. Ken said that the mining strikes divided families and friends, which is very sad. Near the end of the mining strikes, Ken Dixon went back to work, but explained that this was at the very end, so it didn't have any effect on the outcome of the strikes. He retired from mining when Ashington Colliery closed.
Right then, how about you? Gormley?
Here.
Atkinson?
Here.
Summers? Summers! Haven't seen you here before.
Jackie Elliott. I didn't expect to see you here.
Hey, well, things change, don't they?
Yeah, who's the big man now?
Get off on it. Right then, what about the Skylar?
Scat!
Scat! Scat!
Dad!
Scat! Dad, what are you doing, Dad? Dad, what are you doing, Dad? You can't do this. It's for the bed. What are we going to do about the kids? Yeah. And this, and this.
Don't worry, lad. We'll never let you fall.
During our expedition, we learned about the pit closures in 1984. Everyone in the mines lost their jobs and was losing money, as well as people had to move out because of unemployment. The impact on the pit closures was that everyone in the mines and their families got kicked out. They didn't have a job and were not paying their rent to live there.
This links to our guiding question. Because we took miners for granted, something that became clear during the strike, they were the one thing that kept the Industrial Revolution going with all the coal they extracted. The community was affected by the pit closures, where most miners lost friendship and everyone was not spending time with each other. Also, there was conflict between miners that wanted to work and others that didn't go to work. The striking miners felt that they were being betrayed. Nowadays, some of the communities have retained their closeness and work at the school. This is something we owe to the miners, the sense of community that developed.
This term we have been learning about how to sketch mining artefacts for our final project, which will be a local history book. To do this, we have been learning different methods of drawing. First, using a pencil and how to represent tone and texture through pencil sketches, and then a monoprint.
The reason we are sketching mining artifacts is to show important items that the miners used to stay safe. For example, miners' breast checks helped to keep register of which miners were underground in case of an accident. Davy lamps were important as they were designed to prevent explosions such as those at Felling.
These artefacts are from the members in our community, including Mr. Lovett, Eliza from Year 7, and Freya in Year 8. This shows how, even today, how these items are still precious.
Our final sketches are in charcoal to help get really across the dirt from the mines and the texture of our drawings, and also the deep low value blacks which come from using soft charcoal.
Our final product is a book about mining in the northeast that tells the miners' stories. It also shows stories of multiple collieries. It will also contain our artwork of crucial mining artefacts, helmets, lamps and tallies. This book will be sold at the Durham Miners Gala in 2023 and will also be sold in the Seven Stories, the National Centre for Children's Literacy. The final product answers our guiding question: what do the communities of the northeast owe to the miners? Talking about the miners' strike from 1984 to 1985 and the important role the miners played in Britain's development. The book will help people to understand our shared mining heritage.
Coal mining was so important in Britain because they are the people who bring home coal for heating and money for food. That's why the miners' role is so important in the Industrial Revolution, because coal was necessary for fuel. The intended audience of this book is everyone in the northeast because they can learn about miners and collieries. The audience can also learn why their mining heritage is something to be proud of and why we need to remember and honour those who worked in the mines and made sacrifices during the strikes.
Seed Folks is a book we've been reading in Crewe every morning on a Tuesday for the past term.
Seed Folks is a book set in Cleveland, America, and is about a struggling community. At the start of the book, a little girl called Kim decides to plant lima beans, unbeknownst to what this would lead to. What she could not have known is how this would boost the whole community.
Kim's simple act caused many people to come together, and in the end it made a beautiful garden. This small garden helped many people, and the story shows different people, perspectives and backgrounds on how they got involved in helping their community.
This garden made people take pride in their community and not see it as a dump anymore, but to see it as an important place.
The people in the community all came from different backgrounds, but no matter what their religion, the country they were from, or the way they looked, they became a community because they had a shared purpose which bonded them together.
This term we have been growing our knowledge on miners and how their community was strong and how they looked out for each other because they too had a shared purpose. When reading Seed Folks, we have made links to the mining community and LGSM and how they came together despite their differences.
Seed Folks shows another great example of a strong, diverse community. This helps us to get a better understanding of our guiding question: what does the community of the North East England owe to the miners? The miners helped to build our community because they had a shared purpose which gave them a sense of belonging.
Name?
Elliot. Billy Elliot.
And your son's name, Mr. Elliot?
I beg your pardon?
You are here for the auditions, aren't you?
No, he's Billy Elliot.
Occupation?
Well, he's still at school.
No, your occupation.
Oh, well, I'm a pitman, a miner.
You mean you actually work underground?
Well, not at the moment, we're on strike.
Right. this way, please. No, just the children. We're doing auditions on this stage today.
And you are Billy?
Sorry? Billy Elliot from County Durham.
William, stand on the spot, please. William Elliot, you do have some music for us.
No, I've got a cassette named Mrs. Wilkinson. Sorry, it's always on this. I can get it back. You got a pencil? The next bit, you have to bring it on.
Maybe we should just go straight to your exercises.
Frightfully nerve-wracking, isn't it?
I beg your pardon?
I get more nervous about these things than Thomas.
What's your first time, you know?
Sorry?
What's your first time, you know?
Oh, I see. Have you come far?
Eastern Camp in Durham.
Ah, Durham. Beautiful cathedral, isn't it?
No, haven't been.
Really? Oh. Right, this way, please, gentlemen. Auditions are nearly over.
Thank you. That is all. We're done.
Are you alright?
No, it was a complete waste of bloody time. They didn't even see me dance.
For goodness sake, they get all they need to know from the exercises.
They've been practicing for months.
Look, it was only a stupid audition.
Get off.
What on earth is going on here?
Please take a seat, Mr. Elliot. I am afraid, Mr. Elliot, that mutual respect and self-discipline are an absolute prerequisite for any pupil at this school. Such displays of violence will not be tolerated under any circumstance. Do you understand?
Ben, Billy's very sorry. He's been under a lot of pressure recently.
All right. Just a few questions to finish with. Could you tell us why you first became interested in ballet?
Dunno, I just was.
Well, is there any specific aspect of ballet that caught your attention?
The dancing.
Yes, we have a very enthusiastic from your dance teacher, Mrs. Wilkinson. She has also explained your personal circumstances. Are you a fan of ballet?
I wouldn't say I'm specifically like a professional or anything, but it's fine.
Well, you do realise to attain that pupils are expected to attain the highest standards, not only in ballet, but also in their ordinary school academic work. A child can only succeed with 100% support of his family. You are behind Billy, aren't you, Mr. Elliot?
Yes, yes.
Would you like to ask us any questions?
No.
Just one more thing, can I ask you, Billy? What does it feel like when you're dancing?
I can't. I know. I can't really explain it. I haven't got the words. It's a feeling that you can't control. I suppose it's like forgetting, losing who you are. At the same time, something makes you go. It's like that there's some music playing in your ear, and I'm listening, and then I disappear, and then I feel a change, like a fire deep inside. Something bursting me wide open, impossible to hide. And suddenly I'm flying like a bird, like electricity. Electricity sparks inside of me, and I'm free. I'm free.
Billy Elliot was our anchor text and has several links to our mining heritage in the northeast. A good example of these links is that Billy's dad wants him to be a miner, but Billy is reluctant to. This shows Billy still follows his dreams, even though it was not typical of boys during this time. Eventually, Billy's dad almost broke the strike to get the money for Billy's audition. This links to our mining heritage because the miners in the northeast worked in the same mines that their fathers did, which we learned from speaking to our experts at Ashington. We know that mining communities were really strong and supportive. We see this in Billy Elliot when the whole mining community came together and raised money for Billy's audition at the Royal Ballet School in London. Elliot teaches us that no matter what struggles you face, the spirit of community can unite to overcome these. From visiting the ex-mining community we have written about during the expedition, we have witnessed ourselves how this spirit lives on.
Thank you all for watching.
As we have answered our guiding question,
what the communities of the northeast of England are the miners?
We hope you have enjoyed our presentation of learning and have learnt something about our community and an important part of our cultural heritage.
We would like to thank all of those involved for their contributions and sacrifices. We have one last job for you to do. In the comments of this YouTube stream is a link. We would like for you to complete the short exit ticket to let us know what you have learned and give us feedback. This will also be posted on our school website.
We will be ready to be collected from school in 15 minutes. Merry Christmas and stay safe.